Recent history tells us about 35 to 40 MLB players playing at one given time are likely to make the Hall of Fame at some point in any given season. So in today's video, we're going to try to figure out who those players are. I found a little over 60 players who I think have a chance at the Hall of Fame at some point. Let's talk about them. Let's first talk about all the players who I think have had a Hall of Fame career if they retired today. Starting with Mike Trout, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. If you look at his stats, they're very similar to Mickey Mantle. I try not to overvalue WAR, but he already has an 85 career WAR. So even if he struggles with injuries for the rest of his career will be a lot like Ken Griffey Jr., where he was incredible for the first decade or so. Clayton Kershaw is also a clear Hall of Famer. He may be overrated in his playoffs. In fact, he's really struggled. But during the regular season, unquestionably one of the greatest pitchers of all time. Justin Verlander is also a first ballot Hall of Famer and a really interesting case for 300 wins during his career. He's going to be hard pressed to get there, but I think he really wants it, so he's got a chance. His former teammate Max Scherzer, any MLB pitcher who won at least 3 Cy Youngs, is getting in the Hall of Fame. The next player, I know he's unsigned as of right now, but Zach Greinke is an easy Hall of Famer to me. Especially because as we move on, we're going to have to lower what we consider to be a Hall of Fame starting pitcher. We're not getting to 300 wins anymore. It's just not going to happen. I think 200 wins now is a much fairer benchmark, especially with starting pitchers only going like 5 or 6 innings now. Joey Votto, easily a Hall of Famer as well. Is on-base percentage more important than batting average? Because if it's even close, I like to point out the fact that Joey Votto has 7 on-base titles. If it was 7 batting titles, everyone would talk about him as a Hall of Famer. He has a career 409 on-base percentage as of today, and his career 144 OPS plus is definitely in the Hall of Fame range. For some reason, people are not as high on Joey Votto because his counting stats aren't as good, but on a game-by-game basis, he was a Hall of Fame hitter. Mookie Betts, obviously a future Hall of Famer, should be a first ballot. To me, Freddie Freeman and Paul Goldschmidt have had very similar careers, and both should be Hall of Famers. Jose Altuve is an obvious second baseman, but his tie to the 2017 Astros makes it a little bit more complicated. But because his own teammates even said he didn't cheat, I think that's going to help his case. As is, he's definitely one of the better hitting second baseman in baseball history, and he may get to 3,000 hits, especially because he said it's something important to him. Nolan Arenado, one of the greatest defensive third basemen of all time, who's also probably going to have 400 or 500 career home runs. If he retired today, I think he would still be a Hall of Famer. Same thing with Bryce Harper. If he retired today, I think he'd have a borderline case as well. But he is a 2-time MVP. And lastly, even though he hasn't played 10 seasons in MLB, I still think Shohei Ohtani would be elected to the Hall of Fame, just for being such a unique player. But regardless, as long as he plays 10 seasons in MLB, he's going to be elected for this insane peak. Next, some players who I think are likely to make the Hall of Fame as well, but maybe don't quite have a Hall of Fame resume today. Starting with Manny Machado. Third base is already underrepresented in the Hall of Fame, and he's had a really, really good career. He's great on defense. He'll also probably have 400 or 500 career home runs. Next, if you look at Francisco Lindor's stats, they don't just jump out as a Hall of Famer, but considering how good of a defensive shortstop he is, and the fact he's going to have a really good counting stats as a shortstop, I think he's also going to be a Hall of Famer. I also think Jose Ramirez is likely to be a Hall of Famer. He already has over 200 home runs and over 200 stolen bases in his career. Not to mention, he's 6 times appeared in the top 10 of MVP voting. Aaron Judge also has an interesting Hall of Fame case. If he puts together just like another couple of these crazy seasons though, he's got to be a Hall of Famer. And if he stays healthy, he could definitely get to 500 home runs. Another player who could get to 500 home runs is his teammate Giancarlo Stanton. He actually has the most home runs of any active MLB player. And while he struggled to stay healthy in recent years, the one thing he continues to do when he does play is hit home runs. If he gets to 500 home runs, he's definitely a Hall of Famer. If he gets to like 450 or 475, I still think he's likely to be voted in. But WAR definitely does not love him, which may hold him back a little bit. I overall think he's likely to get in. Next, we have another round of players who I think all have Hall of Fame chances, but they're definitely not as obvious because they're either too early in their career or they still have some stuff to prove. Starting with Trey Turner. If he continues to play as well as he has played recently into his 30s, then he's definitely got a chance. But my concern is when his athleticism starts to decline, and he's not stealing as many bases, and his batting average starts to drop off, how good is he really going to be? He doesn't have an overly impressive WAR. He basically has to continue to play at this elite level for another 5 seasons. My vote is he'll fall just short of being a Hall of Famer. Next, we've got Garrett Cole. He's already put together a pretty good WAR for this stage of his career, but I don't love using WAR as a metric for starting pitchers. I definitely think the Cy Young last season helped his case, and he already has 6 200-plus strikeout seasons, including a ridiculous 326 strikeouts in 2019. He has 6 top 5 Cy Young finishes in his career, including winning the Cy Young last year. He's already got 145 career wins too, so he's likely to get over 200 during his career. I think the way he's tracking, he's likely to be a Hall of Famer. Next, we've got Juan Soto. He's obviously got a lot to prove still. However, the way his career is tracking, he is clearly on a Hall of Fame path. His career on base percentage is the highest among all active MLB players, and he has a chance to go down as a truly historic great at getting on base. And imagine if he starts hitting for more power as his career goes on. If he continues to play at this level through 10 seasons in MLB, he may already have a Hall of Fame resume. I definitely think he's going to be a Hall of Famer someday. Next, we've got Ronald Acuna Jr. Well, it's definitely too early to call him a Hall of Famer now. He's definitely on a Hall of Fame trajectory. This is only his 7th MLB season, and he's already led the league in stolen bases twice, won a Rookie of the Year, won an MVP, won a World Series, is the only MLB player ever to have a 40-70 season, and is a career 139 OPS plus. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's a future Hall of Famer. Next, we've got Chris Sale. It's easy to forget just how good Chris Sale was because he's dealt with so many injuries in recent years. However, he was definitely on a Hall of Fame track. And now this season, he's healthy again with the Braves, and he's pitching like an ace again. I had honestly forgotten just how good he was. Before all these injuries, from 2012 through 2018, he finished top 6 in Cy Young voting every single year. And he had at least 200 strikeouts each of those seasons except for one. And the one that he didn't, he still had 192. If he can somehow get to 3,000 strikeouts, he'll definitely be a Hall of Famer. But really, I think he's like 2 or 3 elite seasons away from being a Hall of Famer. I think he can do that. He also has the 2nd best strikeout per 9 rate of any starting pitcher in MLB history. Next, we've got Marcus Semien. He definitely doesn't immediately jump out as a Hall of Famer, but he already has a 44 career WAR. And the one thing I really like about his Hall of Fame chances is the fact he's in the lineup like every day. He already has over 200 career home runs. Second base is definitely an underrepresented position in the Hall of Fame. If he continues to play as a second baseman, he's a well above average hitting second baseman and a very good defender. At this point, he scores over 100 runs every year. He's been on a World Series team. If he gets to like 350 career home runs, that would put him pretty close to the most home runs of all time ever by a second baseman. And I know he was also a shortstop, but I mean, come on, he was also a shortstop, which if you remember back in 2019, he was 3rd place in MVP voting as a shortstop. Honestly, it seems like his hitting gets better over time. He definitely needs some more on his resume, but if he can get into the 60 WAR range with 350 plus career home runs, he's going to make himself a pretty solid Hall of Fame case. Once again, WAR isn't a perfect stat, but like Jeff Kent's career WAR is only 55. Marcus Semien can definitely get there. And I think Jeff Kent should also be in the Hall of Fame. Next, we've got Alex Bregman. His career has been a little bit disappointing after how incredible he was in 2019. But you can say that about a lot of players. That season was ridiculous for overinflated home runs. But he's got a career 133 OPS plus as a third baseman. That's not that far off of like George Brett. And I'm not going to compare him to George Brett. He's not that good. But my point is, he's a really good on-base player. If he continues to be a 370 on-base percentage third baseman, he's going to make a pretty good case. But he's definitely going to need over 300 career home runs, maybe even close to 400. And that OPS plus is going to have to maintain around that 130 range. And it will definitely help his case if he gets it up a little bit higher. I've always been super impressed with Alex Bregman as a hitter. I definitely think he has a legitimate chance to hit for higher average in the future and raise his career OPS plus from this point onward. This is definitely the closest of all the players right now, but I'm going to pick him as one of my Hall of Fame choices. Next, we've got Corey Seager. Obviously, last year we've seen he can be an incredible hitting shortstop, but unfortunately, he deals with a lot of injuries, which makes me pretty reluctant. While I think he's an all-time great hitting shortstop, I don't know that he'll stay on the field enough to actually put up the numbers. He needs some counting stats. And if injuries continue to be a problem, maybe he'll have to move off the position, which is definitely going to hurt his chances as well. But if you could promise me he was going to stay healthy, absolutely he'd be one of my picks. He has a 132 career OPS plus as a shortstop. That would be one of the best in MLB history. For example, that's significantly better than Derek Jeter. Next, we've got Carlos Correa. A very weird career. When you just look at WAR as the metric, he looks like he's definitely on a Hall of Fame track. But he's had a weird career because he's never had like one awesome season. He's just always been pretty decent or injured, which is why outside of 2021 where he finished 5th in MVP voting, his next best season was 17th in MVP voting. But in his age 29 season, he already has a 41 WAR. And he's a great defensive shortstop with a 124 OPS plus. When you look at these numbers, he looks like a for sure Hall of Famer. But he's got to continue to stay healthy. And when he's healthy, he's got to produce. I think what will really help his case if he has like one really noteworthy season, just one career year where he hits over 30 home runs, finishes in the top 3 of MVP voting, that will help him immensely. If he doesn't do that, I don't know. This is probably the hardest pick so far. I don't know what type of longevity he's going to have. I think he comes up just short. Next, Christian Yelich. Another weird Hall of Fame candidacy because he was incredible for a couple seasons. Then the rest of his career, he's just been really good. But outside of a couple seasons, to me, he's just not a Hall of Famer. Unless he turns it around and starts playing like he did in 2018 and 2019. Let's talk about a couple catchers next. We got JT Realmuto and Salvador Perez. If JT Realmuto can stay healthy over the next 5 seasons, put together some decent numbers, I think he's a future Hall of Famer. He's very good defensively, and he was also solid as a hitter. The way I look at it too is like, when you think about the best catchers of this era, these are the catchers I think about right now. Over the last 10 seasons, who do you think about? I think about these two. So to me, kind of puts him on a Hall of Fame track. But Salvador Perez in particular is even more interesting. 8 All-Star appearances, 5 Gold Gloves, a World Series, 4-time Silver Slugger, and a World Series MVP. That sounds like a Hall of Famer. Then you break it down and he only has a 106 career OPS plus. But he also has the most home runs in a season ever by a catcher. When his career is done, he'll also probably have some of the most home runs ever by a catcher, as he already has 254. Such a bizarre career, because when I actually look at these stats, he doesn't feel like a Hall of Famer. But at the same time, when I think about catchers that played during his era, in a lot of ways, he was one of the better ones when you consider all of his accolades. And I just have a feeling that voters are really gonna like him. Well, I think he's gonna be elected to the Hall of Fame at some point, even if his career WAR is underwhelming. We gotta talk about some more starting pitchers. It's very difficult to figure out how the voting is gonna work for them in the future, because they're not getting to 300 wins. They may not even get to 200 wins. So the way I see it is, who are the best starting pitchers of the era? Some pitchers that come to mind. Zach Wheeler. I like what he's doing right now. I think when it's all said and done, it's probably not gonna be a lot of counting stats, but I think he can put together a Hall of Fame resume. It's a stretch. He's gonna have to do this for probably like 4 or 5 more years. If he does it and finishes his career strong, it's up some more 200 strikeout seasons, wins a Cy Young, I think he can get there. Also Jacob deGrom, who's won 2 Cy Young awards and definitely has had one of the best peaks ever by a starting pitcher. If he can come back from Tommy John surgery and give us like 2 or 3 of these really, really good seasons, maybe not even quite the caliber of his insane Cy Young stretch, but just something really good. Give us a couple 200 strikeout seasons. To me, he's got to be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the greatest pitchers I've ever seen. There's also Blake Snell, who's won 2 Cy Young Awards. Pretty much if you win 3 Cy Young Awards, you're in the Hall of Fame. Unless your name is Roger Clemens. But outside of those 2 Cy Young seasons, Blake Snell's not been a Hall of Famer. Especially because he really struggles to pitch for volume. So to me, he's got to win 3 Cy Young Awards and put together a couple other seasons where he's in the running. And then he's a Hall of Famer. However, I think he's likely to fall just short. Another couple pitchers I thought of are like Aaron Nola and Corbin Burns. They definitely have a chance too, but they still have a lot to prove. Play it safe, I don't think either of them are going to be my Hall of Fame picks. Now let's talk about some closers. Kenley Jansen, Craig Kimbrell, and Josh Hader. To me, I think Kenley Jansen and Craig Kimbrell, if they retired today, are likely Hall of Famers because they're some of the best closers in MLB history. Now Josh Hader, he's still got some stuff to prove. Give me 5 more great Josh Hader seasons, he's a Hall of Famer. For this next group of players, it's too early to tell, but I think they're all interesting. Rafael Devers. I'm a little bit worried about his defense. If he becomes a first baseman, it's going to be a lot tougher for him to be a Hall of Famer. He's also a really good hitter, but he might have to do a little bit more than this for me to feel confident he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's definitely got a chance, especially because of how good he's been in the early part of his career. But if he becomes a first baseman, which is what I feel like is probably ultimately what's going to happen, I don't like his chances as much. He's not one of my picks. Next, we got Kyle Tucker. He's one of those players who's just quietly been one of the best players in MLB now for like 4 seasons. He's had a very, very promising start to his career. It's way too early, but I like what I'm seeing so far. He would be one of my Hall of Fame picks. Same thing with his teammate, Yordan Alvarez. You ever just see a player and you're like, this is one of the best hitters I've ever seen? That's how I feel about Yordan Alvarez every time he steps into the batter's box. His OPS plus is among the best of all active MLB players. As long as he stays in the field, I think he's going to be an all-time great hitter. He'd be one of my picks. I also really like where Austin Riley's career is going. Once again, third base is underrepresented, and he looks like he's going to put up a lot of home runs in his career. And he's obviously going to be on some really good teams. Way too early to tell, but he would be one of my picks. Will Smith, the catcher on the Dodgers. This is another close one to me. It's so hard to predict catchers, though, especially ones that are not very far into their career. Play it safe. He won't be one of my picks, but with how good of a hitter he is, I would not be surprised at all if someday he could become a Hall of Fame catcher. Ozzie Albies is another player in the Braves who's very interesting to me. Second base is a position that's not known to have a lot of good hitters. Ozzie Albies looks like a hitter who's becoming even better and better over time. He's still very young. He's early on in his career. Definitely one of the best second basemen we see today. I like him as one of my picks. Pete Alonso and Matt Olson are also interesting. A couple of guys who could get to 500 career home runs. If they get there, they're definitely Hall of Famers. They've got a lot to prove, and these types of players oftentimes fall off very quickly. Just to play it safe, they won't be my picks. Luis Roberts, interesting. Obviously has Hall of Fame talent, but it's way too early to tell. He gets hurt way too often, so he's definitely not one of my picks. Next, we got Julio Rodriguez, off to an incredible start to his career. Super, super early, but very few players in MLB history have been this good this fast. But just for that reason, he's one of my picks. Adley Rutschman is also one of my picks. It's very rare I see a catcher like this. In fact, it's very rare I see a player like this. From the moment he's come to MLB, he's been a star. He's already on a Hall of Fame trajectory. His teammate Gunnar Henderson, it's kind of early to tell. He does look super promising so far. He's played even less in MLB, so he's not one of my picks. Next, we got Vlad Jr. Yes, in 2021, he was incredible. He was also arguably the greatest hitting prospect of all time. But outside of 2021, he's nothing close to a Hall of Fame caliber hitting first baseman. If I'm playing it safe, he's not one of my picks. Though I could be absolutely wrong because at any moment I could see his career taking off. Next, we got Spencer Strider. I don't love the Tommy John surgery. I'm very worried about his career. But from what I did see, he was an incredible starting pitcher. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but he's not one of my picks. I think it's a little risky right now. But I fully expect when he comes back, he's going to be really good again. Next, we got Bobby Witt Jr. Across the board, an incredibly talented player. It's way too early to tell that he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but this is certainly a Hall of Fame skill set. As long as he stays healthy, this is a Hall of Fame shortstop caliber player. He's one of my picks. Next, Next, Corbin Carroll. He had an incredible season last year. He has not looked great this year. It's really early on in his career. This is probably a sophomore slump, but regardless, he's not one of my picks. But he's got the talent to get there. Next, we got Elly De La Cruz, another player who it's way too early. However, one of the things I really like about him is his upside is limitless, especially if he's a guy who could steal 100 bases. There's so many different ways that he could become a Hall of Famer that he's actually going to be one of my picks. Whether it's he becomes an all-time great base stealer, or he's a great power-speed combo, so many things he could do. And a few more players. Luis Arias. Because he's really just a batting average standout, I think it's going to be pretty tough in modern MLB to get in. However, he's a very fun player, but he's not one of my picks. Yoshinobu Yamamoto's pretty interesting because of how incredibly good he was in Japan, like historically good, but I'm going to be cautious and say he's just getting started. This is his first season in MLB. He's definitely not one of my picks so far, especially because Shota Imanaga has actually been better than him so far in MLB. I did consider other pitchers like Grayson Rodriguez and Bobby Miller and some of these young phenoms, even Paul Skeens, but it's just way too early, and I don't trust them with all these pitching injuries happening, so they're not going to be my picks, though likely one of them will be a Hall of Famer. And then lastly, some MLB players who are super early in their career, but have insane upside. This includes Jackson Holliday, Jackson Churio, Wyatt Langford, and Evan Carter. I don't think any of them are great picks today, but I wouldn't be surprised to see any of these players put together a Hall of Fame resume when it's all said and done. So those are my picks. I picked 40 players. We'll see how I do in the future. If you have any other video ideas, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching today's video. Go baseball.